We are Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern14.com here to talk SEC basketball results. Blake, the whole college basketball world was talking about Auburn and Kentucky, and for good reason. That game delivered on every level, and now I think we expect in the few hours when the polls come out, Auburn should be the number one team in the country. Maybe Gonzaga, but probably Auburn.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to deny Auburn after a win like that. I mean, look, it was close last week, and a lot of people thought they should be the number one team last week. And so my thing is, if it was that close, it wasn't many votes, right, that separated them from number one and number two. I mean, they just went out and beat Kentucky. And so I think, they certainly deserve it. Again, we're recording this a couple hours before the poll comes out. I would expect that to be the case, that they will be the number one team in the country for the first time in program history. And look, I think it speaks to everything we've talked about over the years with how this program sort of developed. And I think you kind of saw that, come into play on Saturday with this game. Is you just saw what did we say going in, right? Like, we talked about the arena, the atmosphere, everything. And there's no denying that, what a huge role that can play. And look, I give Kentucky credit. They handled it pretty well early on, right? Like, they came out and got a great start, and I thought that's exactly what Kentucky needed to really be in this game. But there comes a point in time where you see a team like Auburn that when they get going, especially in that gym, they are really hard to stop. Now, certainly you can point to the injury situation with Kentucky. Ty Washington only plays 9 minutes. I mean, you're going to have a hard time. Yeah, and you're not going to beat a team like Auburn if he's only playing 9 minutes. Let's call it what it is. You're going to really have your back against the wall, and it's just different. When he's not on the floor, and we've talked about how well he's played, but I think you give some of these other guys credit too. Like, some of these other guys played pretty well, and I still, though, like, yes, we can play the what if game, and I'm sure it's easy to do that, but at the end of the day, the game was played as it was, and Auburn, rallied to make that comeback. And really, I thought Walker Kessler was the best player on the floor.
Yeah.
He was the difference in this game. I don't think there's any doubt about it. That's not taking anything away from anybody else. But even if you look at Walker Kessler's stats, what do you have? 19 points, 7 rebounds, 2 blocks. That doesn't even begin, I think, if you watch the game, the number of possessions that he impacted goes way beyond just those stats. And I think that was, to me, the most clear thing you could find in this game was he just made such a huge difference. Anytime Kentucky tried to get to the rim, he was there. And even if he didn't block the shot, just him being there impacted, an opportunity at the rim for Kentucky. And I just thought, you come out of this game, Katie Johnson hit some big shots, Green hit some big shots, Jabari Smith hit some big shots, but I thought Walker Kessler was the best player on the floor on either side, and I think he was the reason Auburn won the game.
Yeah, we had actually tweeted that in the middle of the game, that he was having the best game of anybody. Blake, I had done my player rankings on Friday. We do that at the website. We try to rank the top 14 player of the year candidates, and I've got a spreadsheet that you've seen. It's ridiculous. It's got every stat known to man, and then it's statted out per 70 possessions, and I mean, then I go and look at other things like win shares and box play. I mean, if it's out there to be consumed, I will consume it and put it in that sheet and then go with what my eyes tell me. And with Kessler, you look at the numbers, and they're really good, but you watch him play, and you see his impact. And so when I went into Friday to do my ratings, I'd had Kessler middle of the pack of that list of 14, and I put him at 3. And I thought, I might be reaching, but I watched the way that he impacts games. And when you've got Jabari Smith, that also affects things. That makes your job a little easier. So there was a little question in my mind about, does he deserve number 3, but I did it anyway. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, all right, that's going to tell us on Saturday, because he's got Sheboy on the other side, who had a good game too. But to me, Walker Kessler leaves the weekend no worse than 3. He was phenomenal. And that backdoor lob, Kentucky just could not stop.
No, I mean, he just, it was both ends of the floor. It was offense, it was defense, it was, again, I think it's one of those where sometimes it's very easy just to look at the box score, and if you didn't see the game, it's like, all right, well, pretty balanced effort for Auburn. It was a very balanced scoring effort for them, but I think just the guy that really just impacted the game. I mean, like I said, that there are things that are not on the stat sheet that you could have watched some of those defensive possessions and just seen how much he affected, Kentucky's ability to score down the stretch there, and that allowed Auburn to kind of make that rally that they did. And look, I mean, it just there were so many guys, and like I said, it wasn't just Kessler. I mean, it was a lot of different guys made shots at big moments, and that's what you
Contested
got to.
shots, Blake.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, like they took. Listen, you remember the conversation we had about shot selection, right?
Yeah.
And I kept saying I'm not that worried about it, but there was a point where I'm looking around saying, "Ooh, some of these shots are probably not what you want in some of these situations." But when you hit them, doesn't matter because that's what you try to do. Is even if they're contested, so what? If you hit the shot, so be it. And I think that they made some tough shots. Um, but yeah, I mean they just look they are the complete package, and I know that that there may be some fan bases that don't want to admit that, but when you watch them play, there's just so many things to like. And yes, we won't get the rematch in the regular season between these two, but obviously wouldn't surprise anyone if we get a rematch between them in the SEC tournament or maybe elsewhere like we've had before in the NCAA tournament. But yeah, it'd be great to see both teams at full strength for a rematch. But in this one, I know again Kentucky not having Ty Washington that hurts, but I think you can't. You have to have that at the back of your mind, but you also can't take anything away from Auburn from
Yeah.
just making the plays that they made because they did exactly what they needed to do to win. And like I said, I think they should be the number one team in the country, and that's my expectation here as we're recording this a couple hours before the poll comes out.
Well, and Auburn's had a key player out a good bit of the season on Allen Flanagan and won some games without him. I thought Jabari Smith's ability to step out and hit long jumpers. You watch that kid play like you can't stop him. I mean, the way that he hits shots from 17, 18 feet with guys in his face and the fluidity with which he shoots them, he is a special player.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, what is it, 15, 16 games in a row now? He's hit double figures all but 2 games this season. He's been there. Yeah, it's just that's the right word. He's just smooth. Like it's so effortless in what he does. And I mean, it was like it's one of those games where we said, what did we say going in? We said, look, the top three players are probably the ones that decide this game. And kind of was that case. I mean, Kentucky's not in that game. If not for Oscar Tshiebwe hitting some big shots of his own. What's that one shot he hit that was towards the end of the game? I think it was still probably an 8-10 point game at that point, but he just hit that long jump shot with somebody right in his face and just knocked it down. But, that's what we said. Smith, Kessler, Tshiebwe, like those were the guys that sort of determine, how this game is going to play out. But at the same time, as we mentioned, if Kellen Grady hits shots, that makes it interesting for Kentucky. If Katie Johnson plays the way he did, they're just, man, this was one of those games where, like I said, I think you do put all the focus here on Auburn of just being as good as they were to make that comeback and win this game. But I think you see with Kentucky, though, like this is a special team too. And I think that they're going to be right there. Like I think we're going to have these two. I don't think it's any surprise if you ask right now who are the two teams in the SEC that can go the furthest, it's these two. But I think Kentucky, at full strength is just as good. And, I think that's where it's going to be exciting to see these two teams the rest of the way because I think they both are Final Four good.
Yes,
And,
no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, and I just think that it's going to be fun to watch them, develop the rest of the season. And, you certainly hope for no injuries or anything that could impact either one of them, even though, like we said, there was in this game. But yeah, they're both the real deal, and I think we saw that in this one.
You mentioned the shot selection to start the game. That to me looked like a game where Auburn was feeling the weight of the situation. The fans are jacked up. They're camping out 24 hours or more ahead of time. All the craziness that goes with being on a big stage for a program that generally hasn't been there. And then Auburn figured it out, right? But I thought the first 10 minutes were kind of uncharacteristic Auburn basketball, but they survived it anyway.
Well, and that's what I said when that was brought up in whatever the conversation we had, a couple weeks ago about maybe that was their big Achilles heel. I said at the time, I just think that's part of the game sometimes with, you're going to take bad shots, but I think that's just whether it's the atmosphere, the situation, you're going to have guys that just take bad shots. And I don't think that is something that I went back, I used the excuse, right? I went back to, hey, Jared Harper, those teams, like they took some long, deep shots at times that maybe made you scratch your head, and some of them didn't even get close, but some of them went in, and they went in big spots, and I think that's just kind of the free flowing nature of kind of the guard position now in college basketball. You're going to have some guys that are feeling it, like you said, and maybe take some long shots to try to be the hero in certain situations, but I don't think you're looking at, Katie Johnson or Wendell Green or guys like that as labeling them that as a whole as a player. I think that's just part of their game. And, and like we said, that they hit some of those shots in this one that made a big deal. So, yeah, I mean, this was a lot of fun. I mean, we said it'd be a lot of fun, but I tell you, it was a lot of fun just for the basketball, but it was a lot of fun just for the atmosphere of a college
Yeah.
basketball game. It does not get much better than what you saw on Saturday. And that I think is something too that speaks to, again, the total overhaul of this program that is taking place. And I know a lot of people are tweeting out the stats and stuff of where Auburn basketball was before Bruce Pearl and all that. And it is, I mean, we've said it before. You just have to kind of think of where this program was after that. What was it, 2013-14 season, somewhere in there, to where it is now. It's remarkable.
For Kentucky, shout out to Kellen Grady for playing all 40 minutes at a time where his team really needed it. Oscar Tshiebwe, 38 minutes, 16 points, 14 boards. I didn't think his presence in the game at times was felt like the stat line was, but that says a lot. But, look who he's going up against. I think, though, if you're Kentucky, you come out breathing a sigh of relief because you saw Xavier Wheeler go out for the second time in a couple of weeks, came back, looks like he's okay. The big one was Washington, and I was Googling a little bit while you were talking. Adam Zagoria says he's doing fine and will be reassessed daily. He's day-to-day to return. So I think if you're Kentucky, you're fine. You're not shocked you got beat at Auburn, and it appears you're going to be healthy when I think a lot of us were holding our breath on those guys a little bit at moments on Saturday.
Yeah, I don't think there's really many negative takeaways for Kentucky. Like I said, I think they're right on Auburn's level, and they proved that for certain portions of the game. I think it gets a little interesting here moving forward because they've got a pretty tough schedule the rest of the way. I think that's where you probably put a lot of your focus on them is, that's a tricky home game against Mississippi State. If Washington doesn't play, on Tuesday night, that's one that I think can be a little bit tricky, just given what we've said about Mississippi State. They're a team with a lot of potential, and they could match up very well especially from a guard standpoint, right, with Molinar and such. And then after that, Kentucky's got to go to Kansas, and you've still got road games against Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Florida. So Kentucky's schedule is what it is, but if they're at full strength, they're the second best team in the SEC in my opinion, and I think that they'll be just fine. So I don't really have a lot that I looked at that game and said Kentucky lost the game. I looked at it as though Auburn won the game because I think Auburn just made the plays you had to make to win it, and I don't really think that Kentucky did a whole lot to hurt themselves in this game. I think it was just at a certain point Auburn just said, all right, let's go, and they went.
I'm a little confounded at how Auburn is 5 in the net this morning. Quad 1 wins, 5-1. Arizona, which is number 1, is 2-1 against Quad 1. Houston, which is 3, is 1-2 against Quad 1. I can't make sense of this. Can you?
There's a reason why I've told you many times that I rarely check the net until we get closer to the start of the tournament because I just think the net is listen, it's better than the RPI probably, right? But it's still a very flawed metric in my opinion. So
well, and Houston, you're like, okay, did Auburn load up on weaklings? No, Auburn is what, 4-0 against Quad 1, while Houston is 7-0.
Yeah.
Arizona is 5-0. Quad 3, Auburn is 3-0. Houston is 7-0. Beats me. But net rankings this morning, and this stuff's not really going to matter for a couple more weeks, I guess. But for what it's worth, Auburn 5, Kentucky 9, LSU 10, Tennessee 11, Alabama 20, Florida 34, Mississippi State 45, Arkansas 55. Arkansas beat A&M and dropped 3 spots, I think, and then A&M 61. So Arkansas and A&M play each other and both end up worse off for whatever reason. Don't get that, but
That's the net.
Yeah, that's why you love it. Let's talk about some other games. I think the way Tennessee handled LSU was a little surprising. Especially if Darius Days plays, which we didn't think was going to happen Friday, but Tennessee wins that one by 14 points. It was in Knoxville, but what do you make of that one?
I mean, we've said it all year. LSU's not a great offensive team. They're a good defensive team, and Tennessee only scores 64 points here, but I think that's going to continue to be LSU's issue is offensively, and again, they're still without Xavier Pinson. That's such a big part of it too. So yes, I'm surprised it's a 14-point deficit, or a 14-point decision, but when you think about it, maybe it's not that shocking just because there's no Pinson. LSU's already an up and down offensive team. Plus, you're playing a Tennessee team that's one of the best defensive teams in the country. So, and it's on the road, right? So, I think LSU is just kind of the perfect storm for them to kind of have everything go against them in a game like this. And for Tennessee, I mean, they got it done, and that's what we keep talking about is how do they keep finding ways to win, and they've done it a bunch of different ways. And I think in this one, you just have a lot of different guys that contribute in different areas, and I thought it was a really good win for Tennessee. And like we said, I mean, for LSU, this is not that surprising to kind of see them on a 3-game losing streak here. We talked about the schedule, but now the LSU schedule the rest of the way. They've gotten through the tough part. Now things start to get very favorable. I think if you look at their remaining schedule, like it is just, if they can get healthy, LSU's got a chance to really go on a tear here. But that is the big question. Can you get Xavier Pinson back and all that? And if they can, I think LSU is going to be fine. They played a tough schedule. Tennessee, meanwhile, defense. It's both teams. They're going to ride their defense because both are kind of inconsistent on offense. So, yeah, I thought it was a really good win for Tennessee.
Other thing of note, Rick Barnes moved, I almost called him Rod Barnes. That's a blast from the past. Moved Uros Plavsic into the lineup. He played 28 minutes. Fulkerson only got 14, although he got 8 points off the bench. That's one change they made, and you could see him. I watched their game against Vanderbilt last week in person. He was a kid that really gave him a lift, and I think that was a little bit of a jump start that the Vols kind of needed, and it certainly worked out in the first trial.
Can't teach size. Can't teach 7 foot.
He's huge. And he looks like he'd break you in half by looking at him.
Yeah, 7 foot 250, something like that. So you just can't teach that, and he can offer a different elements, and we've kind of seen that. I mean, he's played sparingly, but he started to play more minutes, and clearly, it's paying off at least over the past couple games. So,
hey, don't look up, but who's won 4 in a row in the SEC after starting 0-3?
What did I say? I don't want to say that there was a pretty good opportunity to do that, but I mean. I just think with Arkansas, it's one of those things where, like we said, and it's interesting because they lost those 5 of 6, and you look back last year, you're like, this is different, but they kind of had that little slump too around the same time, and but the schedule has put them in a really nice spot to be able to make up ground here, and they've done that, and we said, I mean, they had to do it. Like there was no other choice because if you're sitting here at even 3-4 or 2-5, and you're looking the rest of the way, you're like, where are those wins going to come? Because now they put themselves back in a great spot. They have that win over LSU, their best win of the season. They get a win over a solid A&M team after losing the first time around. Now you still get Ole Miss, you get Georgia. Those are your 2 next games, both on the road. Won't be easy, but I think they're the favorite in both those. Have a good chance to be 6-3, like we said a couple weeks ago. Don't be surprised if they're 6-3. And then the rest of the way is where you really start to break this down and say, all right, they're not going to lose all those. They're going to win some of those games, and that's probably maybe all they need to be in a really good spot to get into the tournament. So, yeah, I think you give Arkansas a lot of credit. They've really figured it out and much more balance. J.D. Notae's not having to go out and score 25 or 30 for them to win. They just got a lot of balance. They got a lot of people who are contributing. Jalen Williams had a big game in this one against A&M.
Yeah.
So I love what Arkansas is doing right now, and we'll just see how it continues to move forward. So
yeah, Jalen Williams, if you want to point to 2 things, he's one of them. He's playing more minutes now. He played 42 minutes, and he doesn't score a lot, but he did give them 14 on Saturday, and the rebounding has been there. He's one of the better ones in the league. He pulls 11 there. The other thing is Chris Likes' minutes have just gone way down, and they seem like they're better for it. I think Trey Wade is the guy that is getting more of them. Likes had 11 minutes, turned it over 3 times. Wade didn't put up much statistically, but he had 1 assist and 1 turnover. He played 34 minutes. That seems to be two things that as I watch them, and I haven't seen them physically a lot. This is a lot more on box scores, but that's one thing I've noticed. It's a little bit of a trend in them lately. Is Williams stepping up and Likes not being as big a part of what they're doing.
You have to make changes when you've lost 5 of 6 and you're in a 0-3 hole, and I think that's where you give Eric Musselman credit. Is you kind of know that you can't just keep doing what you're doing and hope that it gets better. You have to be able to make some adjustments and see what could work and what isn't going to work. And I think they've done it, like you said, whether that's kind of switching things around on the perimeter. Yeah, and look, it's working out for him. I mean, it's just that's what you have to do is you have to just kind of push those right buttons, and he's done that. And that's where you've had guys like Williams step up and some of these other guys. And we already said this is not a deep team. I mean, they're 7. That's about it. Like they've got their 7, and those are the guys that are going to play. But you look at this game, right? Like this was kind of a 5 or 6 man show here. I mean, they won it in overtime. I mean, like you said, you look at the guys. Amude plays 44. Tony plays 43. Williams plays 42. Wade plays 34. Note 31. I mean, that's pretty remarkable, and that's what I've pointed that out many times. Some of Muss's teams that have had that kind of extra something, they've been 5 deep, and they've made it work. And they're not 5 deep; they're about 7 deep. But I mean, when you have those guys that kind of stepped up the way they did, yeah, very impressive, and I think they're in a good spot.
Mississippi State spanks Ole Miss in a revenge game, 78 to 60. Was that more about State or Ole Miss? Because Ole Miss is not playing well all of a sudden.
I mean, I think it's probably both. I just think that, Ole Miss we talked about. There's not a whole lot to say about a team that's lost 4 straight and they just lost by 25 at home to Missouri, which we'll talk about Missouri in a second. They're clearly playing better, but. Yeah, Ole Miss has won 1 game since December the 18th. So, it's both. I think Mississippi State, I didn't have a lot of concerns about Mississippi State coming to this game. I know they lost that game at Florida, but as we talked about, this is still a team that's beaten Alabama. They got that win over Arkansas. I still think Mississippi State's pretty good. So, I think this was one of those, like we said, this was revenge Saturday, and revenge was had, and this was just one of those that I think that, you got a very balanced effort from Mississippi State, and they're good. I think they'll be in the tournament, but it's just a matter of them finding wins, and this was one they really needed, and they got it.
One thing they seem to get night in and night out, Shaquille Moore and Iverson Molinar. Well, Molinar, that's no news. He's been playing well for 2 years, but Shaquille Moore is a kid that's really stepped up and helped them a lot at times.
Yeah, and they've needed that, just beyond, like we said, it's Molinar's going to get his points, but he's going to be the focus of everyone. And, you've got to have other guys be able to kind of help around that. And, yeah, Moore's doing it. And that gives them a pretty nice combination there just across the board, I think, on the perimeter. So.
Alabama beats Missouri. I don't think either of us left Saturday feeling any better about Alabama. We talked off podcast. Defense is the issue. Are we just at this point waiting for something that's not coming? Or is it just too early to say?
I think the answer is yes. I think if you're comparing this team to last year's team, I think it's time to kind of halt that expectation. And I'm not trying to knock Alabama. It's just, I think you've got to understand that it's not the same team. And tell me, you watched the team last year and tell me there's any resemblance defensively this year to that team last year. There's just not. And I think that's going to cause them a lot of issues. They're having to rely way too much on their offense to carry them through at times, and it's just not working. But look, that's the thing though, is what we say is with Alabama, it goes back to what we talked about with them this year. And that's why it can be very frustrating is they can be elite offensively, which they don't win this game against Missouri unless they figure that out, like unless they just go off, right? Yeah. And that's what they had to do to win this game because Missouri's up, 14? I look back and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know they were up like in a very almost comfortable position.
Yeah, they were.
They're up 14, I think, with 12 minutes left in the second half, and even further than that. Like I think it was, still pretty much in doubt. But yet when Alabama gets going, like we say, Alabama scored 30 points in the final 10 minutes of the game. Like that's what we're saying here. Like that's with Alabama, they can hit that level, and I think you just don't want to put yourself in that position so many times to where you're relying on having to score that many points in that little amount of time just because your defense is not there. And I think that's what they've got to get fixed. Is you look at some of the games they've lost. Obviously, the one at Missouri. Missouri scores 92 points, just a complete should not happen. The game against Auburn, it's just some of those little possessions where defensively, if you make a couple of changes, maybe you win that one. At Mississippi State, same way. So I think that's it. I mean, that's kind of what you draw it up to with Alabama right now. And as we said, it's going to get a lot tougher here come January 29th during this 1 week stretch of Baylor, Auburn, and Kentucky. That is where Alabama, I don't want to say makes or breaks the season. It's not going to break their season. But that's where you've got to prove yourself at this point because you've got so many like that. Think about this too. They've got so many good wins, but I think your frustration is that again, maybe it's self-induced frustration because you're trying to compare them to last year. I just don't think that's fair at this point because they're just different teams, and like I said, they're just not on the same plane defensively as they were last year. So I think that's it. If you have those expectations in check and you're realistic about that, knowing that there's going to be some frustration with this particular team on defense, then they're going to be fine. They're going to make the NCAA tournament, but are they as big of a consistent perhaps team that as they were last year? They're just not. And I think until they find that consistency, it's going to be hard in some of these games to feel completely confident about which way it goes.
Here's what bothers me about that game. There's 5 clear bottom teams in the SEC. It's Missouri, Georgia, South Carolina, Vandy, Ole Miss, right? If that game comes against any of the other 4, I'm like, okay, you have one of those days. But no, it came against Missouri, the team that spanked you a couple of weeks ago. And that should have held that team's attention coming out of the gate, but I guess it didn't.
Here's what I'll say about that, and just someone who's watched this league over the years as you have, and I think it's sometimes it's hard to explain, but
a team just has your number.
There's just a team that has your number, and you just don't, for whatever reason, you either don't play well against them or you don't match up well against them. And maybe that's just it. Could we have guessed that a month ago? Probably not. We wouldn't have thought if Alabama was going to have a team that somewhat had their number at times, would it have been Missouri? You probably never would have expected that. But sometimes it's just the way it plays out. And I think that's kind of one of those where it doesn't make a lot of sense. But at some point, maybe just kind of chalk it up to that. And look, I think you give Conzo Martin credit too, because I think Missouri's getting better. I don't know if it's going to matter. But they're clearly getting better. And I think, look, that's all you can do at this point. So,
boy, Georgia had a comfortable lead against South Carolina and then just collapsed down the stretch of that one.
I keep saying, and it's interesting to say that a team that's 5-14 is probably not as bad as you think. But overall, they're not as bad as you think. But they can have some stretches where they are just not good, and that's what happened here. Because it's just a total. Georgia couldn't score. Like you got to score points to win. And what was it? I don't even remember how many points they scored in like the final. It wasn't many. But yeah, South Carolina just made a furious rally, and that's what you get with teams that are, not great though. Like a team like Georgia is just, maybe there are times where they look good and they have a chance to make it interesting. But, that theory we had of Georgia not really getting blown out, that worked for a while, but,
water is finding its own level, I think.
Well, but I think this one probably too is just a tiny bit misleading because they were up.
They were up 7 with 10 and change, and I think they were up more than that earlier, were they not?
They were up 11, I think, 14 minutes
and lost
left.
by 17.
Yeah, so I think that's, I think the score can be a little misleading in those scenarios, but at the end of the day, Georgia's, the worst team in the league, and there's only much you can say about that. So,
if you want one maybe meaningful takeaway from this, we've kind of called out Keyshawn Bryant at times. He was supposed to be their best player coming into the year. He hasn't really done a lot, and I think injuries may have been a factor, but he was a guy that really led the charge down the end. He wound up with 19 points. Don't know if that's a season high for him, but it might be. So if you're looking for maybe something that kickstarts Carolina a little bit, if Bryant plays better, that's a team that I think, for whatever it's worth, maybe the best in the five of that at that point if he turns it on. Jermaine Cousinard, another guy that's got to pick it up. But if you're looking for try to take something meaningful away from this game, maybe that's it.
Yeah, you did a better job than I did. You did a better job than I did. I think that South Carolina still,
the look on your face was great.
Well, it's just I don't know what you say. Like it's they're just
we try to talk about everybody, Blake.
Offensively, I wish they were better. That's all I can say. So
if you were still watching Vanderbilt in Florida in the second half, it was only because you had to. That game, Florida won that by, 19-20, and it should have been more. Vanderbilt scored 14 points in the second half. It's just gotten awful offensively. They don't have any talent outside of Pippen, and he's not playing well. In Florida, I mean, Breeze without Colin Castleton. I don't know what else to say in this one.
Not many games you see in the SEC where on both sides combined you have one player that scores in double figures, and that is 11 points. Tyree Appleby. I don't know what else to say. Vanderbilt's leading scorer had 7
nobody
points.
Looked good in that game.
No, and that's the thing is I don't think either team's coming away thrilled with how this game played out. You're happy if you're Florida because, as we said, Florida was another one kind of like Arkansas that was going to have a chance to make its move here after, kind of a slow start, and they have. They moved back to 3-3, and I think they'll have a good chance perhaps to get to 4-3. When they play at Ole Miss here on Monday night, which remember it's one of the makeup games. So for anyone that kind of forgot about that, you'll actually have a Monday night showdown this week in SEC basketball. But I don't think. I mean, I think if you're Florida, you're thrilled just because it's a win and you get back to 3-3 and you're in a pretty good spot, and their upcoming schedule also is pretty favorable. I think for the most part when you look at who they play over the next 4 or 5 games in the league. So. I think Florida's actually going to be fine. They really need Colin Castleton back, and I don't know when it's going to happen. But yeah, this was because this was going on. This was during the same time as the Auburn Kentucky game, right? So
yeah,
that wasn't great.
You only watched if you had to.
Yeah. So yeah, there you go.
Parting thoughts?
Nope. We will discuss the upcoming games, like we said. Florida Ole Miss is a standalone game, so I guess I don't really have a lot to say about that. We pretty much talked about both of these teams and what we just said. I think I'd probably pick Florida just because I do think that they're starting to figure some things out, but I think this game could be a grind. Just based on how both teams, it could be because based on how both teams are playing, I think it could hit that level. So that's at least worth noting is we do have a Monday night SEC game. So
got to pick on that one.
Yeah, I pick up Florida. I think that they're playing better. And
lines -5, -6ish probably based on KenPom. Well, no, I think it may have come out actually.
Well, any way you slice it, I think this is probably a close game, even though Ole Miss is just they're not playing well right now. So I think Florida wins though.
Okay. And tell folks we've got a special deal with Action 24/7. Let's tell people about that.
Yep. Description of this video, just click on that down there. Action 24/7. Promo code is South14. Sign up, first deposit, they'll match up to $800. And just use that code South14 and click on that link in the description below.
Here's one more thing to click on. If you watch us and you haven't, please hit that subscribe button. That helps us out tremendously. We're starting to get noticed. We're starting to get picked up a lot more by search engines, but the subscriber count is important to us, and if you can do that, that helps us out. Okay, he's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. We're coming back with several more videos this week. We'll pick all the games. We will recap all the games. Anyway, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you again soon.